also known as Hulk Hogan, was experiencing a serious medical-related issue. Personnel provided medical treatment at that time and transported Mr. Balea to Morton Plant Hospital, where he died.
Hulk Hogan's death was officially ruled as cardiac arrest, but now a nurse has come forward with leaked hospital audio revealing that his final moments were far more intense than anyone expected. Hogan spoke words that were never meant to be heard. Everything we thought we knew about his final hours is being questioned. Let's break it all down. The shocking death that rocked wrestling forever. On July 24, 2025, at exactly 11:17 a.m., the wrestling world was shaken to its core when Terry Gene Balea, known worldwide as Hulk Hogan, was pronounced dead at Morton Plant Hospital in Clearwater, Florida. But what happened in those final moments, and what a brave nurse would later reveal, tells a story far more complex and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. The timeline of events began much earlier that morning, painting a picture of a man whose body had finally succumbed to decades of punishment, controversy, and personal struggles. At 9:51 a.m. EDT, emergency personnel responded to a medical call at Hogan's residence in the 1000 block of El Dorado Avenue, Clearwater Beach. The wrestling icon, whose real name was Terry Balea, was experiencing what would later be confirmed as cardiac arrest, the final chapter in a life that had been as tumultuous as it was legendary.
It was discovered at that time Terry Balea, also known as Hulk Hogan, was experiencing a serious medical-related issue. Personnel provided medical treatment at that time and transported Mr. Balea to Morton Plant Hospital, where he died at 11:17 a.m.
But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn, one that would later spark controversy, heartbreak, and questions about medical ethics that continue to this day. What transpired during those crucial minutes at Morton Plant Hospital wasn't just a routine medical emergency. It was the final act of a man whose life had been defined by larger-than-life personas, deep personal struggles, and relationships that had been strained to their breaking point. The official police investigation, led by Major Nate Burnside of the Clearwater Police Department, found no signs of foul play or suspicious activity. The timeline was clear. First responders arrived at 9:56 a.m., police were dispatched at 10:19 a.m., and Hogan was transported to the hospital at 10:32 a.m. For approximately 30 minutes, medical professionals fought desperately to save the life of a man who had entertained millions but had also become one of wrestling's most controversial figures. What makes this story particularly compelling and disturbing is what allegedly happened during those final moments. According to sources that have emerged since Hogan's death, a nurse who was present during his final hours at Morton Plant Hospital has come forward with audio recordings that capture Hogan's last words. These recordings, if authentic, provide an unprecedented glimpse into the final thoughts of a man whose public persona had been carefully crafted over decades, but whose private struggles had become increasingly apparent in recent years. According to multiple sources who claim to have heard the full recordings, Hogan's final words were not coherent statements, but rather fragments of desperate attempts to communicate with family members who weren't present. The most devastating aspect of these alleged recordings is how they reveal a man who understood, perhaps for the first time, the true cost of his actions and choices. The first alleged recording reportedly captures Hogan asking medical staff to contact his daughter, Brooke. Those familiar with the audio claim that Hogan, despite his weakened condition, was insistent that he needed to speak with her immediately. When informed that she was not listed as an emergency contact and that the hospital had no current contact information for her, Hogan allegedly became increasingly agitated. But perhaps the most devastating part of these alleged recordings involves Hogan's apparent confusion about why his family wasn't with him during his final moments. Those familiar with the audio report that Hogan repeatedly asked nurses where his children were, seemingly unaware or unable to process that his relationships with them had been severed years earlier. The estrangement between Hogan and his daughter had been particularly painful because it wasn't based on a single incident, but rather a gradual erosion of trust and respect. Brooke's concerns about Hulk's health and his inner circle had led to their distancing, particularly after his 2023 marriage to Sky Daly, which she did not attend. She had cited disagreements over his health management and her distrust of those she believed were taking advantage of him. The context surrounding Hogan's death makes these alleged recordings even more significant. This wasn't a man who died peacefully in his sleep after a long, fulfilled life. Hogan had been dealing with significant health challenges in the months leading up to his death, including a major 4-level anterior cervical discectomy and fusion spinal surgery surgery in May 2025. His wife, Sky Daly, had described the surgery as intense, and it was just the latest in a series of medical procedures that had defined Hogan's later years. The physical toll on Hogan's body had been devastating. He had undergone over 25 operations in the last decade alone, including 10 back surgeries, both knees and hips replaced, and multiple shoulder surgeries, all consequences of his wrestling career. But perhaps more damaging than the physical pain were the personal relationships that had crumbled around him, particularly with his family. The estrangement from his daughter Brooke had become one of the most painful aspects of Hogan's final years. In March 2025, it was revealed that Brooke had been estranged from both her parents for about 8 years, unaware of her 2022 marriage to NHL player Stephen Oleksy, or the birth of her twins, Oliver and Molly, in January 2025. This wasn't just a simple family disagreement. It was a complete severing of ties that would haunt Hogan until his final breath.
Parents are divorced. That's like two coasts, Florida and California. So I'll be spending Thanksgiving with my dad and Christmas with my mom.
But that was from happier times, years before the complete breakdown of family relationships that would define Hogan's final chapter. Brooke's estrangement wasn't just about typical family disputes. She claimed she was extremely verbally and mentally abused during childhood, though she didn't directly name her parents as the abusers. The most damaging controversy of Hogan's later career had occurred exactly 10 years before his death, a cruel irony that wasn't lost on those who had followed his story. In 2015, leaked audio from a 2007 sex tape revealed Hogan using racial slurs and expressing racist views about his daughter Brooke's dating life. The impact was immediate and devastating. WWE terminated his contract and removed him from their Hall of Fame. This wasn't just a career setback, it was a character assassination that revealed a side of Hogan that many fans had never imagined existed. The man who had preached training, prayers, and vitamins to children worldwide had been exposed using language that was not only offensive, but showed a deep-seated prejudice that contradicted everything his public persona represented. The wrestling community's reaction was swift and unforgiving.
I think Hogan's a piece of shit. Obviously, I'm going to be like Steve Austin, yay, right. But that's it. That's another podcast.
That's right. CM Punk's assessment was harsh, but reflected the sentiment of many in the wrestling world who felt betrayed by Hogan's revealed prejudices. Even more damaging was the reaction from black wrestling fans and performers. The revelation of Hogan's racist comments created a permanent rift that would never fully heal. MVP labeled Hogan a racist and stated he held no love for him, while the New Day issued a joint statement saying Hogan didn't represent their values and chose not to interact with him. This context is crucial to understanding what allegedly happened in those final moments at Morton Plant Hospital. Here was a man who had spent the last decade of his life trying to rebuild relationships and repair damage that many felt was irreparable. The leaked audio recordings, if authentic, suggest that these efforts weighed heavily on his mind, even as his life was slipping away. But the family estrangement may have been even more painful than the public controversy. The breakdown of Hogan's relationship with his daughter Brooke was particularly devastating, with sources indicating that her primary concern was protecting Hogan from those she believed were exploiting his fame and fortune. In 2023, Brooke had actually requested to be removed from Hulk's will, citing distrust in those surrounding him. The pain of this family breakdown becomes even more tragic when you consider that Brooke named one of her twins Molly Jean in honor of Hulk, suggesting that despite their estrangement, she still carried love for her father. Yet her last conversation with Hogan was in September 2023, 2 weeks before his wedding to Sky Daly, where she expressed her love for him. Understanding this context makes the alleged leaked audio from his final moments even more heartbreaking. According to sources familiar with the recordings, Hogan's final words weren't the confident proclamations of Hulkamania or the political rhetoric that had defined his later years. Instead, they were reportedly the desperate pleas of a father who realized too late that his actions had cost him the most important relationships in his life. Wrestling legends. Remember, others refuse to forget. The death of Hulk Hogan created a fascinating dichotomy in American culture, one that perfectly illustrated the complex nature of his legacy and the deep divisions that his controversial past had created. On one side stood wrestling legends, celebrities, and fans who remembered the man who had inspired them, mentored them, or simply entertained them throughout their lives. On the other side were those, particularly in the black community, who refused to let his racist past be overshadowed by nostalgic tributes. The resulting contrast painted a vivid picture of how differently differently Americans process the legacies of their most complicated public figures. Perhaps no reaction was more emotionally raw and revealing than that of Ric Flair, Hogan's longtime friend and occasional rival. When TMZ reached out to the Nature Boy just hours after the news broke, they captured what would become one of the most moving tributes in wrestling history. Flair, visibly shaken and fighting back tears, opened up about a friendship that transcended their scripted rivalries.
More than you'll ever know. People always wanted to paint us as enemies, but we were actually very, very close friends. And we kept it up with each other on a regular basis. So
Flair's emotion was evident as he continued, revealing the human side of their relationship that fans rarely saw. The conversation took on an even deeper significance when Flair shared personal anecdotes that illustrated Hogan's character beyond the wrestling persona.
my son went to 6 rehabs, and he never. My insurance didn't cover rehab, so Hulk lent me money one time to keep him in rehab and keep him off life support. So I've never forgotten that. And I went to pay him back, and he said, "You never have to pay me back. I'm here for you."
Even more touching was Flair's revelation about Hogan's support during his own health crisis.
When I was dying in the hospital, I don't remember, but he was the first one there. So how do you forget things like that?
These intimate details painted a picture of Hogan that contrasted sharply with his public controversies. A man who, despite his flaws, showed up for his friends in their darkest moments. Flair's tribute was echoed across social media, where he wrote, "I am absolutely shocked to hear about the passing of my close friend Hulk Hogan. Hulk has been by my side since we started in the wrestling business." The wrestling world's tribute continued with voices from across different generations. Michael Cole, WWE's longtime commentator, provided perspective on Hogan's cultural impact during a SportsCenter appearance.
Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon created sports entertainment. There's a reason that Netflix and Peacock and USA Network are bringing our shows on a weekly basis because of what they created back in the 1980s, taking this small regional promotion and turning it into this global juggernaut.
Cole's analysis touched on something crucial: Hogan's role in transforming wrestling from regional entertainment into a global phenomenon. He emphasized how millions of people his age would not be professional wrestling fans today if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan. Glenn Kane Jacobs, now serving as mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, offered his own perspective, focusing on Hogan as an inspirational figure.
I was at a WWE show in St. Louis, Missouri at the Checker Dome, and when Hulk Hogan came out, he was in the main event, the roof just blew off the place. And that's when I decided, man, I would really like to be a professional wrestler, because be at the center of all that energy, and everything was just amazing to me.
Perhaps most significantly, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson shared a deeply personal story that illustrated Hogan's character and kindness. Johnson recounted a moment from 1984 when, as a 12-year-old, he caught Hogan's headband at Madison Square Garden and returned it to him. Hogan, touched by the gesture, gifted Johnson the headband, saying it was his last one and that the act meant the world to him. Even Mick Foley, who had his own complicated history with Hogan, chose to focus on the positive aspects of their relationship.
Yeah, it was a really nice moment. I mean, it was a show, but I believe he was 100% sincere, because he not only apologized to me for something that was said, at least 25 years earlier, but he insisted on apologizing to me a second time. And I accepted it, and I considered him a friend before that. But I definitely helped bond. That was a nice bonding moment for us.
Foley went on to share what he considered Hogan's true legacy.
But that Hulk Hogan, my friend said, those kids from Make-A-Wish and other wish organizations, they'd go in there and they'd just be beaming. And you can't feign the type of joy that Hulk brought to those kids. Like, that was real in his heart, which is why it seemed so effortless.
Sergeant Slaughter, Hogan's former rival who had headlined WrestleMania 7 against him, revealed a touching story about how their match came to be.
And he says out of the side of his mouth, "Hey, good to see you back." And I, side of my mouth, I said, "Good to be back." He said, "I told Vince I wanted you back." I said, "What? What?" And he said, "Yeah, I told Vince to bring it back.
This revelation showed Hogan using his influence to help a fellow wrestler, contradicting some of the narratives about his backstage politics. But while the wrestling world largely mourned Hogan's passing, a very different reaction was unfolding in other corners of American culture, particularly within the black community. The contrast was stark and immediate, serving as a reminder that Hogan's 2015 racism scandal had created wounds that never fully healed. Roland Martin, a prominent political commentator, perhaps best captured this sentiment when he responded to tributes with a meme featuring Hogan's infamous racist rant about his daughter dating a black man, captioning it simply, "Same guy." This response encapsulated the feelings of many black Americans who felt that nostalgic tributes were whitewashing Hogan's problematic past. The reaction on black Twitter was particularly pointed, with many users using humor and sarcasm to express their lack of sympathy. Posts included sentiments like, "Satan about to have his way with you, brother," which garnered significant engagement, indicating widespread sentiment among black social media users. One viral video captured this sentiment perfectly, with a black content creator refusing to offer condolences.
Stop saying rest in peace to Hulk Hogan. His mother ass was racist. I mean, if you racist, you can say rest in peace to him, but to people that ain't racist, because he was racist as
This reaction wasn't coming from a place of arbitrary hatred, but from a deep hurt and disappointment. Many black wrestling fans had grown up loving Hulk Hogan, only to feel betrayed when his racist comments came to light. Kazim Famuyide, a black wrestling enthusiast and co-host of the Ringer Wrestling Show, perfectly articulated this internal conflict. He described Hogan as a superhero to a lot of people, including myself, while also acknowledging the irreconcilable contradiction of Hogan's racism. The pain was particularly acute because it came from a childhood hero. Master Tesfatsion, a black sports journalist and WWE enthusiast, noted that he had attended Hogan's final WWE appearance in January 2025 and joined the crowd in booing him, a significant moment given it was his first time seeing Hogan live. He remarked, "I never thought that I would see the Hulk in person and that I would resort to bullying him," indicating how Hogan's actions had alienated even lifelong fans. The divide wasn't just about race, it was about accountability and forgiveness. While some, particularly white fans and wrestling personalities, were willing to separate Hogan's professional accomplishments from his personal failings, many black Americans felt that this selective memory was part of a larger pattern of American society's willingness to forgive white celebrities while holding black public figures to different standards. This sentiment was captured in various social media discussions, where comparisons were made to how black celebrities' scandals are treated versus how white celebrities' controversies are handled. The feeling among many was that if the roles were reversed, if a black celebrity had made similar racist comments about white people, there would be no nostalgic tributes, no separation of the man from the character. Interestingly, there were also black voices that chose forgiveness. Some pointed to Hogan's baptism at age 70, arguing that his religious conversion showed genuine remorse and change. But these voices of forgiveness were largely drowned out by those who felt that Hogan's apologies had been insufficient and that his later political associations, particularly his support for Donald Trump, showed he hadn't truly changed. The contrast between these reactions revealed something profound about American culture and the nature of celebrity redemption. It showed how the same person could simultaneously be remembered as a beloved entertainer who brought joy to millions and as a racist whose words had caused deep pain to an entire community. Controversial legacy and the price of American heroism. The controversy surrounding Hogan's legacy wasn't new. It had been simmering since 2015 when his racist rants first became public. But his death crystallized these debates in a way that felt urgent and immediate. The same man who had asked children to say their prayers and take their vitamins had been revealed to have used the N-word liberally and expressed deeply racist views about his own daughter's dating life. The details of Hogan's racism scandal were as shocking as they were disappointing. In 2015, leaked audio from a 2007 sex tape revealed him using racial slurs, including the N-word, while discussing his daughter Brooke's dating life with a black man. He had expressed discomfort about her, reportedly dating a black man, and stated, "I am a racist to a point." The impact was immediate and severe. WE terminated Hogan's contract and removed him from their Hall of Fame in July 2015, erasing him from their website and programming. The organization cited its commitment to diversity and inclusion, effectively canceling one of its biggest stars. But the racist comments weren't limited to that one incident. In 2008, jailhouse phone calls between Hogan and his son Nick, who was serving time for a car crash, also surfaced, revealing further racist comments. This pattern of behavior painted a picture of someone someone whose racism wasn't a momentary lapse, but appeared to be ingrained in his private conversations. The wrestling world itself had been grappling with these contradictions long before Hogan's death. Many wrestlers had publicly criticized him over the years, not just for his racist comments, but for his backstage politics and treatment of fellow performers. Bret Hart, one of wrestling's most respected figures, had been particularly vocal about his issues with Hogan, calling him very limited as a wrestler and saying he didn't know a headlock from a headlamp. CM Punk, never one to mince words, had been equally blunt in his assessment. Even current WWE star Seth Rollins had weighed in on Hogan's controversies, particularly after his controversial Netflix appearance, where he was heavily booed.
I am all for people getting what they deserve. That's how I feel about Hulk Hogan getting booed on. If you are getting booed by the masses, there's a reason for it, all right? So I don't know if Hulk fully understands the scope, but people get what they deserve.
Rollins continued with a nuanced take that acknowledged both Hogan's contributions and his failures.
But I do think there's some responsibility that he needs to own up to that he hasn't yet. And maybe when he finally figures that out, might be able to move forward with our fans.
The criticism wasn't limited to his racist comments. Jesse Ventura had held a grudge against Hogan for decades after Hogan informed WWE owner Vince McMahon about Ventura's attempt to unionize wrestlers in the 1980s, leading to the effort being shut down. This incident painted Hogan as someone who prioritized his relationship with management over collective wrestler welfare. The Undertaker had his own issues with Hogan, stemming from a 1991 match where Hogan claimed to be injured by Undertaker's tombstone piledriver, only for video review to show that Hogan's head never touched the mat. This incident led Undertaker to view Hogan as untrustworthy. Scott Steiner had been one of Hogan's most vocal critics, calling him a cancer in wrestling and accusing him of manipulating creative decisions to bury younger talent. After Hogan's racist remarks surfaced, Steiner called him a piece of on social media. But perhaps the most significant criticism came from those who had been directly affected by his actions. The reaction from black wrestling fans and commentators revealed the deep hurt that his words had caused. One content creator captured this sentiment perfectly.
Don't y'all remember that SEX tape that was leaked about him? It was during his legal battle with Gawker. That man was involved in racist scandals. In 2015, it was a leaked audio that had resurfaced. And guess who was in it? Mr. Hulk Hogan himself. And he was using racial slurs and kept repeatedly saying the N-word.
Another black commentator was even more blunt in his assessment.
Rest in peace, R.I.P. Or does R.I.P. stand for he was a real ignorant piece of
The pain was particularly acute because so many black fans had grown up loving Hogan. O'Shea Jackson Jr., Ice Cube's son, had been one of the fans who booed Hogan at his final WWE appearance, explaining his reasoning.
I'm asking why.
The nigga hating.
Okay. Okay.
The racism, bro.
Yeah.
It's just hard to forget how detailed that rant was. And if you look up his rant, it's very detailed. And, I get a lot of people online who are like, oh, well, he would be mad if he found out about that whole generation. Yeah, well, when I find out, I'll be mad. But like right now, yeah, bro, bringing him out here, what did you think was going to happen?
The generational divide was also apparent in how different groups processed Hogan's death. Younger black Americans, who had grown up with more awareness of systemic racism and less tolerance for racist behavior, were particularly unforgiving. This was in stark contrast to some older wrestling fans who were more willing to separate the performer from the person, despite attempts at redemption, including his 2018 reinstatement to the WWE Hall of Fame. Many felt that Hogan had never truly made amends for his racist comments. His apologies were met with mixed reactions, with many feeling they were insufficient. Mark Henry, a black WWE legend, noted that while some were willing to give Hogan a second chance, others remained skeptical about his motives. The controversy was further complicated by Hogan's political associations. His vocal support for Donald Trump, including his appearance at the 2024 Republican National Convention, reinforced perceptions among his critics that he hadn't truly changed. For many, his political alignment seemed to contradict any claims of having learned from his racist past. The death of Hulk Hogan thus became a microcosm of larger American debates about accountability, redemption, and the nature of heroism. It raised fundamental questions about whether someone's professional accomplishments could outweigh their personal failings, and whether society society had an obligation to continue honoring those who had caused significant harm to marginalized communities. The wrestling world's largely positive response to his death stood in stark contrast to the reactions from many Black Americans, creating a divide that seemed to mirror broader cultural and racial divisions in American society. This wasn't just about one man's legacy. It was about how America processes the legacies of its most complicated public figures. Some argued that Hogan deserved forgiveness, pointing to his later in life religious conversion and apparent attempts to make amends. Others maintained that the damage was too severe and too public to simply be forgotten. The debate revealed deep philosophical differences about the nature of forgiveness, the possibility of redemption, and the responsibility of society to hold its heroes accountable. The family's response to both Hogan's death and the alleged recordings has been carefully controlled. Brooke learned of her father's death through her brother Nick, who contacted her husband Stephen Oleksy. Her tribute on Instagram emphasized their sacred and spiritual bond while acknowledging the private disagreements that had led to their estrangement. Brooke's July 29, 2025, Instagram tribute described their relationship as having never involved public fights, but rather private disagreements, especially over his health and inner circle. The alleged recordings, if authentic, suggest that Hogan understood and accepted responsibility for these disagreements in his final moments. The timing of the alleged recordings' emergence has also raised questions about motivation and agenda. The fact that details about the recordings began circulating within days of Hogan's death suggests either a coordinated leak or multiple individuals with access to the audio. This has led to speculation about whether the leak was motivated by financial gain, personal vendetta, or a misguided belief that the public had a right to know Hogan's final thoughts. Like this video? Click on the link showing on your screen for more.